Hi everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a developer here at Easy Agile. Recently I've been learning about CSS container queries, and I just want to share what I've been learning, how they work, and why I might want to use them. So before we talk about CSS container queries, we should have a look at what's been available in the browser for a long time, which is media queries. And they serve a similar purpose, but you'll see why container queries are an evolution on that. So what we've got here is some product components. And you can see I've got this laid out here using like a flex column layout. So the specs are like stacked on top of one another. And what I've got here is like a media query. And what it does is when the page is larger than 800 pixels, I'm going to swap it over to a flex row layout. So let's see what that does. So you can see once it hits 800 pixels, it's swapped over to my flex correction row, and you can see all the specs that it's in a row. You can see that worked well for like the bottom part there. We can see for the top one that it's sitting inside a container that has a smaller max width. It didn't work super well there. And there's a bunch of different ways you can get around that. You could write more media queries every location where you use these elements and make it did that container. But yeah, it's pretty tedious, and it doesn't work really well with like how we write modern components in web apps these days. So to use a container query, the syntax is very similar to media queries. So what we would do is change this from @media to @container. And yeah, you can see that didn't really do anything. So we've reached larger than 800 pixels, but nothing's happening. So there's one other thing you need to do to get container queries to work, which is you need to define a container as a container. So I've got this container class on these. Yeah, I've got this container class on the elements you can see with the blue border. Now that we've added this container type to specify that it's a container, I'll get into it in a minute what that inline size property means, but you can see now if we expand the browser larger than 800 pixels, you'll swap over to using the flex row layout, and you can see the top one hasn't changed, and it hasn't flipped over to using the other layout because it never hit that 800 pixels, because it's now referring to the container instead of the whole page. Yeah, and what that inline size property does is allows you to query the width of the container. And you can see it's also had some other side effects. So I had this pseudo element, this content, where I've got the container text. You can see that's what's in the container text there. And before, without making a container, it didn't appear, and that's because making a container also gives it like a position relative behavior. And so there's a few other side effects as well that we're about to see happen when you make something a container. So this layout we're looking at isn't super realistic, so let's change this to something you might actually use. So we're going to change this to like an article layout where you've got an article and then you've got a sidebar. So to do that, let's just change our top level class here to row. Get rid of that. We're going to remove the hard-coded widths. And yeah, so something strange happened. So this is one of those other side effects I was talking about. When you make something a container, it no longer bases its width on on its children elements. So you can see it's kind of this is more in the children elements and squashing its width completely up. And the only width left is from the padding that I've given the container element. And yeah, I don't 100% know why it behaves like that, but my guess is because you wouldn't want to have like a circular dependency almost, where it's like the parent is basing its width on the children, and the children like changing its width based on the parent. Regardless, there's a bunch of different ways we can get around that. Because we're using flexbox here, we can just set some flex properties to make it expand in size. And yeah, if we want to make it like the article and sidebar layout we're looking for, let's just make the max width of that sidebar 300 pixels. And just to make it, give it a bit more height, I'm just going to add some text as well. Cool. So now we've got that layout we're after, and you can see that yeah, the components using two different spots, and it will just it'll just behave. It'll behave based on its container group that we set, and yeah, you can see on the right again, because it's never reaching that 800 pixels, it's not going into that row layout. So we've looked at how you can write container groups based on width, but you can also do it based on the height as well. So how we can go about that is the container type property. So to do that, you have to actually change it to a different property, and that one is container type size. And so as far as I'm aware, there's only two properties for container types, inline size or size. And when you set it to size, you can query both the width and the height of the container. Yeah, you can see it kind of had the same side effect as well. So now it's not basing its height on the children elements. So once again, a bunch of different ways we can get around that, but let's just set a height on the container. So you can go, let's just go height equal to the view height of 80%. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can write in the container query. I'm not sure if this is part of container queries, but there's also now a new syntax you can use in your media queries and container queries. So instead of using min width, max width, we can just, or min height, max height, we can use if height is less than 400 pixels. So it's a lot nicer to read, I think. And so based on that rule, let's say, let's hide the image if it's less than 400 pixels. And so now, when the container is smaller than 400 pixels, you can see the images go away. Another feature with container queries is named containers. So you might, I could see you might have a problem where you have lots of containers in the DOM, and you might want to point to a particular one, not just the direct parent. So one way you can get around that is to use named containers. So named containers, what you do is after you define the container rule, you add the name of your container, so my container, and then there's another property you can add to your classes, so container name, and you give it that name. So now this, the container name matches the name on our container query. And now you can see when we reduce the container to less than 400 pixels, you can see only the main container apply that rule. Another feature with container queries is in container query units. So what we can do is, where's the one I'm looking for? Yeah. So for example, you could change the font size based on your container. So let's give that like 5% of the container query width. And then you can see as that container expands, the text also expands. And yeah, you can see one that's just a static width, it's just stuck there at, yeah, this font is just staying the same. Yeah, so I think container queries are going to obviously be very useful just for day-to-day development, but I think where they really stand out, where they're going to stand out is like component libraries. But I think it is going to be a bit awkward because of having to define the container. So I've been thinking about how component libraries might get around that, and I think one way might be that every component from like a component library might also include a container component that you use along with it. So maybe something like this, where you import the product component and the container component and you use them together. I think practically that's going to be very difficult because then you're using a bunch of components from the library, you can have lots of components. So I think ideally what's going to happen is the documentation of component libraries might just have something that flags that, oh, this component works with container queries, and you as a developer will just have to know that you have to set up containers. Like you have to use that container type property of the container to define it to make it work well with that. And then maybe they'll provide like a prop, like container name and yeah, whatever you want to call it, so that specify what container you want it to use for the container queries that it needs to. So I guess a very important question, can you actually use this in the browser yet? Not really, like the support is getting there, not available in Firefox just yet. But when I first started looking at this like 2 months ago, it wasn't available in any browsers, so it seems to be yeah, becoming available pretty quickly. Like how I got it working is like a feature flag in Chrome. So it's really good to see that it has good support now. And yeah, once it has Firefox, I'm really keen to use it in production. Yeah, that's all I have to share. Does anyone have any questions?
You can't use CSS variables in media queries. Can you use them here?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Can you, what do you mean you can't use? You can use CSS variables in media queries?
If you're trying to set the width, like min width, the value, you can't use the CSS variable.
Let's give it a go. How does that work? I have that syntax.
Yep. Oh no, you're gonna have to put in like a root element of the site.
Oh, you can tell I've never actually used them.
Let's say you set a container size of 800 pixels in the root as your container variable. You can then add a media query to change that variable size to say 1200 pixels.
Yeah, but it's the other way around.
So you want to do it like
so if you just wrap it in bar brackets.
You know the bracket. One more
you missed the
bracket.
Yeah, that's the same. What did you use that with? Calc? The lack of syntax highlighted doesn't help you.
Yeah.
I'm going to change that back to media. It doesn't work. It doesn't. Oh, is it? Yeah, either way, it's
Thanks, that was really good info. You know how you were showing how it collapses the container when you apply the container. Was it container type or container? What was the property that you set the inline? Yeah. So you were talking about like creating that loop, like the container width is normally dependent on its children. And in this case, it's collapsing because the children are dependent on the container. Does it still, can you still set things like min width, like fit content or min content as some kind of minimum, or does it just completely ignore all of those rules, min max and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I've tried. Like definitely set widths, like we did. Yeah, I'm not sure about fit content. I should know if it's collapsing completely.
Yeah. It'd be a nice, easy solution.
Yeah.
So, hey, minimum width, let's put in like make it adhere to its children, but then override it with the container query.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first saw that behavior, I was like, oh, this is very strange, but yeah, it makes sense to me anyway. But yeah, we don't want them basically going to make fun of each other. Any other questions?
Got a bit of a newbie question. I'm used to working with like CSS in JS sort of solutions where you use like some React variable to decide how wide to make the CSS. Do you think that this sort of container queries you use that with CSS and JS, or you keep it to those like CSS only?
Oh, like libraries like style codes, like I think you can still use container queries. I think you can definitely, like, so what we just did there, you could definitely do with JavaScript on your own, but I think downsides of that would be that's probably not going to be very performant. It's like additional code you need to maintain. You write yourself, it probably has bugs. But I think yeah, libraries like style codes actually they can write CSS. Yeah, I don't see a reason why it would work with it. Cool. Thanks everyone.
Have a 5-minute break and then we'll go on to the next talk.